Don't bother learning her name. She's just a quiet woman they shuffled over from Army admin. She'll be gone before the paint dries. Cook said it to Lance Corporal Harmon from the doorway of the S1 records office at 0810, voice calibrated to carry without appearing to project. Not shouted, not whispered. Something between, pitched to reach every desk in the room and still register as conversation. There was a craft to it that he had developed across 14 years and 3 admin tours, a technique refined in precisely the kind of setting where paper outranked people and the NCOIC's word was the only calendar that mattered. He had run enough records rooms to believe he had become the institution itself. The administrative wing of a Marine Corps installation reinforced this belief. The fluorescent bars, the toner smell, the acoustic deadness of rooms built to hold paper and not sound, all of it said that this was a place where a man who understood the machinery could make the machinery respond to him. Charlotte Cross was 2 desks away. She did not look up. She turned a page. A private at the adjacent desk stole a glance at her. She gave him nothing to look at. No tension in the jaw, no held breath, no acknowledgement that any part of the preceding exchange had registered. Her left hand sorted physical folders by date of submission. Her right advanced through the digitized personnel records terminal in the same continuous motion, both hands working simultaneously, neither checking the other. The throughput was approximately 340 records per hour, triple the standard rate for a civilian admin transfer clerk. A small yellow sticky note at the corner of her monitor was printed in very tight block letters. Its contents stayed where they were. She did not look at it. She did not need to. The records room smelled of cardboard and climate-controlled air. The fluorescent bars overhead produced a sound just below the threshold of conscious hearing, the kind that wears on people without their ever naming the source. Cross worked inside that sound, without appearing to hear it, without appearing to hear Cook either, though she had processed every word of his delivery. The cadence, the pitch shifts, every pause, the precise angle of contempt embedded in the phrasing. She had learned to hold information that way, passively, completely, without any externally legible intake, in the way still water holds a reflection without effort or distortion. At 0827, Cook returned to the corridor, louder now, gesturing at Harmon with a manila folder he was using more as a prop than a document. Cross was at the file cart near the corridor entrance, back to the room. In the 3 seconds she faced away from him, her gaze completed 1 circuit of the space, the door behind Cook, the window at the corridor's far end, a lance corporal's hands moving at the adjacent station, the fire exit to the left. The circuit finished before Cook's next word landed. Her eyes returned to the folder in front of her. The whole thing looked like a blink. Not quite a blink. Something marginally more purposeful than a blink, which is to say it was nearly invisible. Which is to say it was invisible to everyone in that room. Nearly. The man crossing the admin courtyard outside the glass was Sergeant Major Daniel Ortiz, 22 years of service, 3 combat tours, base senior enlisted advisor, 400 Marines distributed across an installation he had to account for from the first formation to the last. He had a senior NCO meeting at 0900. He was not planning to stop. Then something through the records room glass interrupted that plan, without asking permission, and it was not the gunnery sergeant performing in the corridor. It was the stillness of the woman at the file cart, the specific quality of how she occupied that space. Ortiz had spent 22 years developing a fluency in the way people stand under pressure, the way the body telegraphs what the face does not. And something about the woman at that file cart was wrong in a way he could not name yet and could not dismiss. He filed it, the way he filed things that turned out to matter. He walked on. At the building's corner he stopped, not deciding to, just stopping, and looked back through the glass. Cross was already at a different drawer, attention forward, as if the previous 10 minutes had produced no weather that could touch her. She was moving between the drawer and the terminal, and back to the drawer, with the same economy she had shown since the moment he first registered her. Cook's voice was still audible from the corridor, muffled by glass, doing whatever it was still doing. She was not registering it. She was not registering it in a specific and deliberate way. Ortiz reached into his breast pocket. His fingers found a cigarette he had not known he was carrying, from a pack he had quit 2 years ago. He looked at it for a long moment. He did not light it. He put it back. Something had followed him out of that courtyard. He did not yet know what it was. The morning after, the S1 section had a problem that would cost careers if it went unresolved before 1000 hours. A cascading records error had mislinked 218 promotion recommendation packages for 3rd Battalion to the wrong deployment cycle, enough to invalidate the entire batch and trigger a review that would roll back through the Battalion S1 and climb from there, finding names and explanations along the way. The kind of error that, in an admin section, does not happen anonymously. Lance Corporal Tia Harmon discovered it at 0812. She stood in the doorway of the records archive room with the expression of someone who has just realized they are counting floors while falling. She brought it to Cross because Cross was the only person already logged into the system. Cross looked at her. "What's the cutoff?" Harmon said. 1000. Cross checked the clock above the archive room door, 0812, and sat down without further comment. 47 minutes. Cross worked through the database with a methodology Harmon would later try to describe to 3 separate people and fail each time. Not data entry, something closer to surgery. Deliberate incision, no wasted motion, no retracing a step, each corrected package triggering the corrections of the next in a sequence that had no visible logic to Harmon, but also had no hesitation. The archive room held 2 terminals, a filing rack along the south wall, and the particular smell of paper that has been handled a great many times by a great many hands. Cross did not appear to notice the smell, or the clock, or Harmon watching from the doorway, or anything that was not the work. At 0859, all 218 packages were corrected, re-linked, and resubmitted with amended timestamps. Cross printed a 1-page correction log, signed it with her civilian cover name, and set it in the outbox. She returned to her transfer folders. She did not look at Harmon. Harmon stood in the doorway for a moment longer than she needed to. She would tell Webb about it later that afternoon, and then Rivas, and each time she would arrive at the same sentence and stop. I didn't even ask her for help. She was already in the system. At 0907, a routine radio call came in for the records section, a supply sergeant requesting a personnel file number. Cross was nearest the terminal. She picked up the handset. Records, cross-reference Echo 79er, file 228, over. Date-time grid phrasing, 3-syllable call-out structure, the cadence of something trained into the body until it comes out ahead of thought. She caught herself a half-beat late and added the civilian close. "Ah, that's the package you're looking for, Sergeant." She set the handset down. Harmon, still in the doorway, looked up, frowned, looked away. Cook received the correction log at 1100. He read it once. His face did something complicated. Not gratitude. Not the expression of a section head, whose people had just salvaged a battalion's promotion cycle from a career-grade error. Not even the grudging acknowledgement of a man who understands what just happened and does not like what the understanding requires of him. Something more internal than any of those, and less legible. He handed the log back to Harmon. Anyone could have caught it. He said this in the flat, certain voice he used when he had already decided what the truth was going to be. He told her to pull a full list of the civilian clerks' currently assigned projects. Harmon produced it within the hour. Cook studied it with the focused attention of a man who had switched registers entirely. Not loud, not contemptuous, not performing for any room. Cold and deliberate, the more dangerous setting by a significant margin. The correction log was correct. 218 packages. 47 minutes. No announcement. No credit claimed. No glance at the door to see if anyone had been watching. In the Army, there is a word for that kind of work. It is not clerk. The records room went on doing what it always did. Folders, terminals, the hum of the fluorescent bars, the rhythm of a section that ran on Cook's certainty that he was the only person in it who understood how all of it fit together. On the desk beside Cross's monitor, the yellow sticky note caught no one's attention. It never did. She had counted on that. What Cook could not see, reading the typed column of file assignments with that careful, focused attention, was that 2 of the items on that list were the precise records Cross had been navigating toward since the day she arrived. He had just handed her a formal paper justification to access them. He believed he was closing a door. He had already left a window open and signed his name to the frame. Every tool he reached for had been designed, somewhere upstream, by someone he would never be permitted to meet. He did not know this. She had counted on that, too. By day 4, Cook's cold calculation had curdled into something more public. He convened an impromptu admin standards review in the records room with the full section present, civilian staff included, and used the format to dress Cross down twice by name, both times for infractions that did not exist in any document he could have produced. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Reyes cycled through the records division on administrative days. She was present at the far wall, standing opposite Cross, watching the same room Cook was performing in and arriving at a steadily different read of it. The first citation was the format of Cross's Day 1 correction log. The log was correctly formatted. Cook read from the clipboard as though it were not. Voice flat and authoritative. The tone of a man who has issued enough corrections to know that certainty, performed convincingly enough, is nearly always believed regardless of its foundation. Cross did not dispute it. She did not look up from the page her pen was resting on. The second citation was the position of her desk, facing the window rather than the wall, in violation of a section protocol Cook cited from a memo dated 3 years before Cross's arrival at the installation. He read the citation number. He gave the date of the governing memo. He did this in front of 6 people with the precision of a man who had prepared. The room was very quiet. Cook in this mode was rehearsed and controlled, the performance of authority rather than the exercise of it, but so consistently maintained that the line between the two had blurred even for him. Then he found the error in PFC Marcus Webb's outbox, a misfiled personnel packet, wrong SSN suffix on the cover sheet. Webb was 19 years old, 9 months in service, 2 weeks assigned to this section. Cook did not check the submission date. He did not ask when Webb had been assigned. He did not pause to cross-reference any document that would have taken 30 seconds to pull. He issued a formal counseling statement on the spot, announced it to the assembled room, and told Webb he would carry it until the next review cycle. In front of his peers, on the record. Without a single question asked, Webb said, "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant," and looked at the floor. His jaw was tight, and he was doing the arithmetic of a 19-year-old who understands he has been handed a mark he did not earn and has no mechanism to challenge in this room, in this moment, in front of these people. The counseling statement would go in his file. It would be there for a year. It would be the first thing anyone saw when they pulled his record during the next promotion cycle. All of that had just been decided in 40 seconds, without a single verifying question. Cross's pen had not moved from the page it was resting on when Cook walked in. She stood against the wall to the right of her desk for the full 11 minutes of the review, weight centered over both feet, spine exactly vertical, hands at her sides. Not leaning, not shifting once, not checking the clock. Lance Corporal Rivas, at the adjacent workstation, stole a glance at her at the 3-minute mark, and again at the 9-minute mark. The second time because the first time had not satisfied whatever it was he was trying to confirm. Something about how she occupied that space made him look away both times. He would not be able to describe it later. Reyes, standing opposite, noticed it and said nothing. She filed it in the same mental space she had been filing things about this woman for 4 days. A space acquiring density without yet acquiring a name. The review ended. The room cleared. Webb was at his desk, pulling the counseling form from the printer, jaw still tight, hands finding something to do. Cross walked past him on the way to the filing cabinet. She set one sheet of paper on his desk, without stopping, without looking at him, without any change in her stride. A printed batch upload timestamp, the original error date circled in red pen, 3 days before Webb's first day in the section. She was already at the cabinet with her back to him when he read it. He looked up. She did not turn around. She returned to her desk. She opened the green notebook, small, hard-covered, always in the left breast pocket of her jacket. She wrote 2 lines, closed it, looked up. Her expression had not changed. Cook had just handed a 19-year-old Marine a formal counseling statement for a mistake he never made, in front of his peers, on the record, without a single question asked. Cross had documented every word. She had timed every second. And the man with the clipboard had not once looked at the quietest person in the room, which was, as it happened, exactly the most dangerous mistake he could make. If that makes you want to put your fist through something, wait. It gets worse before it gets right. By day 9, Cook's moves were paperwork rather than presence. Using his authority as Section NCOIC and the grammar of routine administration, he initiated a formal performance and access review of all temporary admin transfer personnel, a process he routed upward to the S1 duty officer for signature and framed as a standardization measure across the section. First Lieutenant David Nash had been commissioned 8 months. He had been at this installation for 5 of those months and had been trusting Cook's section expertise since the first week. Did not cost him yet. It was about to. The memo's language was neutral, procedural. Standardization of temporary personnel access protocols. Cross was not named. She did not need to be. She was the only temporary admin transfer civilian in the section. Nash read the memo once, asked no questions. Cook had been running this section longer than Nash had been commissioned, and that kind of institutional seniority carries weight in a duty officer's morning, and signed it. He went back to his brief. He believed he had approved an administrative tidying. He had signed a loaded document drafted for one specific purpose. The IT corporal delivered the downgrade notification in person at 10:15, a printed form, 2 copies, 1 for the file. He looked like a man who has been sent to do something he does not fully understand and is not certain he endorses. He stood in the records room doorway long enough to make the errand feel official without making it feel earned. Cross read the form top to bottom, once, without her expression changing in any direction. She initialed the receipt line with the same pen she used for everything. She returned the form. "Thank you, Corporal." She returned to her work. The IT corporal left. Across the room, Harmon watched with an expression she did not know what to call. Something adjacent to recognition, reaching toward a shape it could not quite find. She had watched this woman absorb 2 named citations in a section review and a records access downgrade in the span of 9 days, and had not once seen her react. Not with anger, not with frustration, not with the particular kind of careful nothingness that people wear when they are suppressing something. Just continuity, as if the weather outside had no bearing on the work in front of her. Harmon went back to her folders. She filed this too, in the same drawer where she filed all the small things that had not yet cohered into a larger picture. At 11:07, A call routed in from the base JAG office, requesting clarification on a personnel record Cross had submitted. She took it on the corridor landline. She gave the JAG clerk a document number, a date-time grid reference, and a file suffix. Package 091, DTG 231105, suffix Tango Romeo, advise when confirmed. 3 beats, 0 filler. The JAG clerk paused on the other end of the line. Cross shifted register. That's the file you need. Take your time. She hung up. Gunnery Sergeant Reyes, on her way to the copy room, had stopped walking. She stood in the corridor for a moment, looking at the space Cross had just vacated. Cross was already gone around the corner. Reyes turned back toward the copy room. The mental drawer stayed open. Still no name for what she had seen. Just the shape of it, getting clearer every day. At 1130, Cook passed through the records room, not to address anyone, not to review anything, just a transit of the space that he made occasionally as a reminder of presence. He did not look at Cross directly. He looked past her desk in the way that a man looks at a thing he is trying not to appear to look at. Cross was in the middle of a document pull. She did not look up. The room noticed Cook's passage and settled back to its rhythm. Cook went back to his section desk. He had not spoken. He had not needed to. The point of such transits was atmospheric, and the atmosphere held. The access downgrade took effect at 1200 hours. The IT office's standard processing lag left a 45-minute window between the corporal's visit at 10:15 and system enforcement at noon. Cross did not use the window to pull the specific file she had been building toward, too direct, and the access log would flag it. Instead, she planted a digital waypoint in the adjacent records category, a routine timestamp entry, 1 layer above the target, that would read as system-generated noise to any auditor. It was the 15th such breadcrumb since day 1. She had been laying them with the patience of someone who already knew where the path ended. She was alone in the archive room for 4 minutes before the lock engaged. In the last minute, she reached into the inside pocket of her jacket. Matte black, no larger than a thumb drive. She held it against the system's access log, the original permission tier, the override timestamp, Nash's signature, the date and time the authorization had moved from Cook's draft to the lieutenant's pen. One quiet click. She pocketed the device, walked back to the records room, and sat down. The folders were exactly where she had left them. Sergeant Major Daniel Ortiz had a base to run and 400 Marines to account for, and he had not been watching the woman in the records office with anything approaching obsession. The instinct he had filed on day 0 had stayed with him in the way that only certain things do, the way a room sometimes tells you something before your eyes have finished looking. He had spent 22 years learning to trust that signal without becoming its prisoner. On day 13, he acted on it. He took his morning walk through the courtyard at 0745. Habit, not assignment. At the angle where the window frame gave him a clean line into the records room without being visible himself, he stopped. Cross was already at her desk. Her shift began at 0800. He recorded this in his field notebook, small, green-covered, pocket-sized, and noted the time beneath the morning entry. He walked on. At 10:15, Reyes was escorting a new intake of personnel folders down the records corridor. Cross was returning from the archive room. They passed in the narrow space. In the 2 seconds of proximity, Cross's gaze completed its run without any visible transition. The door at the corridor's far end, Reyes's hands on the folder stack, the overhead mounted camera, the fire door behind Reyes. The scan was finished before Reyes could consciously register it had happened. Reyes stopped walking a half step past the point of passing. She turned and looked at the retreating figure. She could not name what she had seen, only what it felt like, the sensation of having been measured and found to pose no threat by someone who had made that assessment in the time it took to blink. She stood there a moment longer than she needed to. Then she continued, a little more carefully than before. Ortiz, at the corridor's far end, watched Reyes's reaction. He nodded, very slightly. Once. Not confirmation of what Cross was, confirmation of what she was not. A records clerk, even a capable one, even a disciplined one, even one who had been in the army for 15 years, did not make the air around her feel that particular way. Did not make a gunnery sergeant with combat experience stop in a hallway without knowing why she had stopped. He had seen that quality once before, in a compound outside Kandahar, in a man he had been told was a logistics advisor, right up until the moment he was told otherwise. At 14:30, he closed the senior NCO office door. He did not use the base landline. He took a personal cell from his left breast pocket and dialed from memory, a number he had not dialed in 3 years. He removed his cover and set it on the desk, brim up, while the line rang. He stood at the window and looked at the admin wing across the courtyard. He waited. That same afternoon, Cross submitted a standard personnel records request, form unremarkable on its face, routing anything but. She sent it through the G1 officer chain rather than the standard admin path. To any auditor reading the log, a minor clerical preference. To the JSOC handler reading traffic from a facility none of this base's personnel were cleared to know existed. It read as a single word. Noticed. The line connected at 14:35. No greeting from either side. Ortiz said, "It's Danny Ortiz. I've got a civilian admin worker on this installation. S1 records. Been here 5 months. She's pulling files that don't connect to each other. Not in any way an admin clerk would know to connect them. And she stands, like nobody I've seen since Kandahar." A long pause. Not the pause of someone searching for words. The pause of someone making a decision about how much of an answer to give. Then the voice on the other end, calm, measured, carrying the weight of someone who already knew the shape of what Ortiz was describing and was now deciding how to respond to being confirmed, asked, "Where are you right now, Danny?" Not who is she? Not what has she accessed? Not has she done anything actionable? Not how long has she been there, or what files has she touched, or what does she look like? Where are you right now, Danny? The question of someone who already knows the answers to the other questions, and needs only to know how close Ortiz is standing to something that matters. The call lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Ortiz looked at the phone in his hand. He opened the field notebook and wrote one word beneath his morning entry. No rank, no unit, just the word. He closed it, put his cover on, and opened the office door. Every step he took back into the corridor was the step of a man who now understood he was standing beside something he did not have the clearance to see in full. He called a number he hadn't dialed in 3 years. The man who answered didn't ask who she was or what she'd accessed. He asked where Ortiz was standing, which is the kind of question that only makes sense if the answer already matters to him. If you understand why that was the one he asked, you already know this story is bigger than one Marine Corps records office. Don't stop now. The night after Ortiz made his call, Cross was alone in her temporary quarters at 21:30 hours. A standard transient officer room, beige walls, metal frame cot, a window that faced the motor pool. The room held almost nothing personal. A duffel on the floor, a paperback face down on the window ledge, the spine creased halfway through. A mug of cold coffee on the metal desk. She sat on the edge of the cot, back straight, feet flat on the floor, hands loose in her lap. She had been sitting that way for 11 minutes. This was not insomnia. This was the rest posture of someone whose nervous system had been calibrated to a world where an alarm could mean many things, and most of them required immediate movement. Weight centered, spine erect, head level, hands relaxed, without being slack. In a civilian context, this kind of stillness reads as unusual. In the right context, it reads as exactly what it is. The posture of someone who has spent years in hides and observation posts and rooms where the smallest unnecessary motion was intelligence handed to the wrong party, she thought, and the motor pool outside made its nighttime sounds, and the room held her thoughts. Her name was Charlotte Cross. She was 30 years old, a captain in the United States Army. She had been inside this records office for 5 months. She had touched approximately 960 personnel files. She had constructed a case that implicated 14 individuals, 3 shell logistics companies, and 1 procurement node, connecting this installation to a distribution network running east into the North Caspian Basin. Phase 2 had 23 days remaining on its operational window. The man with the clipboard did not know her name. He did not know her rank. He did not know that the last person who had stood over her the way he did was currently cooperating with federal investigators from a room without windows. She had not come here because of Jeffrey Cook. She had come here through him, through what he represented, through the administrative blind spot he created that let her work. He was not the problem. He was, at best, a byproduct. At worst, he was a liability she would need to account for before the window closed. In 2024, Captain Charlotte Cross had commanded a Delta Force troop on a joint JSOC-CIA counterintelligence mission designated Sable Corridor. 8 months. The target. A foreign asset embedded inside a senior U.S. military command, operating there for 3 years before the first thread surfaced. At the operation's end, the asset was extracted without a shot fired in the final phase. 2 procurement tier nodes exposed and burned. The source material recovered in those final hours. Documents, payment records, an encrypted correspondence chain that took 6 weeks to fully decode. Seeded Phase 2. Captain, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Call sign, Warden. She had earned that call sign in a denied area direct action cycle in her first operational rotation, in a room where the lights had been out for 11 hours, and the only thing between the mission and its failure was the quality of her stillness. All of it had to stay inside this room. Once, here, in the beige walls at 2130 with the cold coffee on the desk, and the motor pool beyond the window making its sounds. 14 individuals, 3 shell companies, 1 procurement node, 23 days remaining. She was here because this was where the chain led, and she had not come this far to follow it to the wrong conclusion. She reached for the paperback on the window ledge. She opened it to the dog-eared page, not to read it, but to look at the margin. 1 word, in her own hand, in the same tight block letters she used for everything that mattered. Mardon. She had written it on the 3rd day of Phase 2, in a different city, in a different institution, looking at a different window. She had written it the way you write the name of the thing you are moving toward when you need to remember what the movement is for. When the climate-controlled air and the fluorescent bars and the small daily contempts start to accumulate the way institutional weight always accumulates, and you need 1 word to stand against all of it and tell you why you are still in the room. Not a threat, not a prayer, a bookmark for what this was all for and what came next. She closed the book. She turned off the desk lamp. She sat back in the dark, back straight, hands in her lap, and did not move for a very long time. By day 20, Cook had exhausted the passive end of his toolkit. The memos, the access review, the standards performance. None of it had produced the result he wanted, which was a woman who flinched. She hadn't flinched, not once. Not by a degree he could measure or point to or use. What he did on day 20 was not passive. He was in Nash's office at 0900 with the printout, an access log showing Cross opening a records category that he had concluded, without checking a single upstream source, without pulling the master access table, without verifying the clearance tier against the actual downgrade memo he had himself initiated, was above her authorized level. He had been turning this over for 2 days. He had run the argument in his head until it was smooth from the handling, until it felt like certainty. And certainty was a thing he knew how to deploy. He had deployed it 200 times in 14 years, and it had almost always worked. He did not call JAG. He did not confirm with the IT security office. He brought it to Nash, voice controlled and certain, telling the lieutenant this needed to go on the record immediately. Nash had been trained to trust an experienced Geisert's Rid on section violations. He picked up the phone. He believed he was backing a solid judgment. He was signing his name to someone else's mistake. Nash entered the records room at 10:20, Cook a step behind. 6 witnesses: Harmon, Webb, Reyes, Rivas, 2 other clerks. The room had the quality of a room that has not been warned. People at their stations, the ordinary sounds of an admin section in mid-morning, and then Nash in the doorway with the prepared statement in his hand, and the sounds stopping one by one as each person understood something had shifted. Nash's mode was formal and uncomfortable. A lieutenant reading a statement a gunnery sergeant had loaded for him in front of personnel who would notice the discomfort and draw their own conclusions about what it meant. He read from it. Cross was in violation of access protocol. She had accessed restricted personnel records beyond her authorized tier. He required her CAC immediately, pending a security review. Nash held out his hand. Cook stood at his shoulder, not quite smiling, the way a man almost smiles who has already counted his winnings. Cross did not respond immediately. Her eyes moved in the following 4 seconds with an unhurried deliberateness that was different from anything she had shown in this room before, methodical, complete, taking inventory. The security camera above the door, running, time-stamp indicator at 10:21. The 6 faces in the room, counted, noted by name. The access terminal screen behind Nash's left shoulder, her own login visible in the session bar. Cook's hands at his sides, still, satisfied. She was not assessing threat. She was documenting. Every element in this room had just become part of the record, time-stamped, witnessed, preserved on camera at 10:21 hours. She reached into her lanyard. She unclipped the CAC card. She set it on the desk, not in Nash's open hand. A small distinction, legible only to her, and she did not explain it. She picked up the green notebook and the coffee mug. Nash moved to escort her toward the door. She turned, and for the first time in 20 days, something other than blankness occupied her face. The smallest smile, not defiant, not angry, not the expression of someone celebrating. The expression of someone watching a chess piece move itself into exactly the square she needed it to occupy. Almost amused. It lasted less than a second. Nash held the door. Cross walked through it without looking back, without a pause in her stride, without any of the body language of a person who has just been escorted from a room under accusation. Nash followed. The door swung shut. Cook stood in the middle of the records room. Around him, 5 clerks and 1 gunnery sergeant had gone back to their work with the careful attention of people who understand that the correct response to what they have just witnessed is to look busy. Nobody looked at Cook. Harmon found something to do with her terminal. Webb kept his eyes on his desk. In the last moment before the door swung fully shut, Cook had seen it. That smile, small, private, almost amused. He had been studying this woman for 20 days and had never once seen that expression. Something moved in his chest that did not feel like satisfaction. Smaller than doubt and larger than discomfort. He stood there for a moment after the door closed. He did not know what it meant. He should have known. He had been building toward it for 20 days without understanding what he was constructing. 4 days later, at 13:40 hours, the admin courtyard moved the way it always did in the middle of a working afternoon, traffic in both directions, the ordinary institutional hum of a large base doing what large bases do. Then the hum changed. A sound from the south, low, rhythmic, unmistakable to anyone who had spent significant time near a flight line. A UH-16 Black Hawk on final approach to the admin courtyard helipad. No medevac markings, no logistics manifest. It set down without announcement, main rotor still turning, and 2 passengers stepped off, both in Army service uniforms. One of them was wearing a star. Sergeant Major Ortiz had been at the courtyard's edge since 1325. He had not known exactly when they would arrive. He had been certain they would. The 2 passengers cleared the rotor arc. Brigadier General Elias Harker, JSRC, and Command Sergeant Major Terrence Foley, JSRC. Neither in flight gear. Both in service uniforms, moving with no urgency in their stride, and no sense of improvisation. Men who have come to close something move with the measured inevitability of a door settling into its frame. They did not walk toward the command building. They walked toward the S-1 wing. Cook had emerged from the records office. He saw the star and moved to intercept. His instinct was to manage, to position himself between the section and anything that arrived from outside. "General, I'm Gunnery Sergeant Cook, S-1 Records NCOIC. If you need to be directed to—" Harker's eyes moved past Cook without his stride breaking. Not through him. Past him. The way eyes move past furniture. Cook stepped aside. He did not fully understand why. He did it. Cross stepped through the records wing door at 1344. She was carrying the green notebook and the coffee mug, the same item she had left with 4 days ago, which had seemed like a small administrative detail at the time. Harker and Foley stopped 6 feet from her. Harker removed his cover. Foley removed his. The courtyard went entirely silent. Not the silence of an order given, not the silence of a voice cut off, but the silence of a space recalibrating around a fact it did not previously have. Harker spoke. "Captain Cross." A beat. "Warden." At the courtyard's edge, Ortiz closed his eyes for 1 second. He exhaled once, slowly. He opened them. Everyone who had worked beside Cross for 5 months looked at her face in the same moment, and each of them experienced the same delayed recognition, arriving at different speeds. Webb thought of the morning she had left the timestamp on his desk, without stopping, without turning. Harmon thought of the radio handset, and the cadence she had walked back a half-beat too late. Reyes thought of the hallway, twice, the frowned-after figure, the mental drawer she had kept open for weeks. Rivas thought of 11 minutes against the wall. All of them looked at Cross's eyes in this moment, the way she was reading the courtyard around Harker, the way she had always read every room, and understood, finally, that they had been in the presence of something for which they had never been issued the right category. They had looked at her every day. They had seen nothing. She had seen everything. Protocol is older than opinion. Cross was a captain, O3. Cook was a gunnery sergeant, E7. A commissioned officer identified by a general officer in front of assembled personnel. The obligation was not a question. Cook raised his hand to his cover. His jaw worked once, the smallest motion, the only external sign of what was happening behind his eyes. He brought the salute up. He held it. Cross received it and returned it. Crisp, unhurried, exact. She held it 1 beat longer than protocol required. Then she dropped it and turned back to Harker. She did not look at Cook again. He had ceased to require her attention. Cook's hand came down. The courtyard was quiet. He had called her furniture. He had called her a name he had not bothered to learn. He had been rendering military courtesies to strangers for 14 years, and had never once been fully certain the moment would cost him more than the gesture. This one cost him everything. Ortiz said it low enough that only the lance corporal beside him heard it. The operation name, Sable Corridor, spoken with the careful pronunciation of someone who has just received confirmation of a thing he suspected and does not take lightly. The lance corporal looked at him. Ortiz stared at Cross. His expression was not triumphant. It was something much older than triumph. The MPs arrived within minutes, summoned by a call Foley had made from the helicopter on approach. Cook said something. The word misunderstanding was in it, and possibly the word mistake. The MPs did not slow down. His escort reached the door of the admin wing, and Cross watched him go. Not from across the courtyard, not from behind a desk, but from beside Harker, where a captain stands when the general has come to her. Her back was straight. Her eyes tracked the exits, because that was the only way she had ever known how to stand. The reckoning was fast, the way these things move when the documentation is airtight, and the documentation had been built across 24 days by the person it was meant to bury. The JSOC delegation had arrived with paperwork that JAG Major Claire Soto spent 20 minutes reviewing before she began making calls. At 1500 hours, Cross set the green notebook on the JAG conference room table and placed the matte black device beside it. Major Soto began logging. The access downgrade memo bearing Nash's signature and Cook's draft language. The Day 20 false accusation transcript pulled from security camera footage. The access log exonerating Cross on every count across 5 months of work. The Day 3 formal counseling statement issued to a Marine who had not yet been assigned to the section when the underlying error occurred. 14 documented entries across 24 days. Cook's own paperwork formed the primary architecture of his undoing. At 1520, Nash signed 3 statements on the record. He confirmed the timeline. He confirmed Cook's instructions. He confirmed he had not independently verified the access violation claim before presenting it in front of 6 witnesses and a running camera. He looked like a man who had been underwater for 3 weeks and finally surfaced, unsure yet whether the air above was good. He asked if he should speak to an attorney. Soto said that was his right. He nodded. He kept signing. At 1535, Soto read the Day 3 entry aloud. The error date circled in red. Webb's first day in the section. The 3-day gap between them. She flagged it for the base commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Tyree. Across the building, a staff sergeant appeared in Webb's workspace and told him the formal counseling statement was being withdrawn and expunged. Command error, no record. Webb looked at his desk for a moment. In his top drawer was the folded timestamp Cross had set there on Day 4, without stopping, without looking at him. He had kept it. He didn't say anything. He closed the drawer. At 1630, Colonel Tyree read the summary document. Cook attempted an explanation. Tyree waited until Cook was finished. Then he set the document down and looked at him. You manufactured a security accusation against a federal intelligence operative acting under JSOC authority. You used a commissioned officer as the instrument. You did it in front of 6 witnesses and a running camera. He did not say you are relieved. Cook was enlisted. The language governing this outcome was different. He said, you are being referred for Article 15 proceedings and a full adverse fitness report. Gather your effects. 2 JAG officers stepped in from the corridor. Cook said the word appeal. One of them explained, in a measured and practiced tone, what that process entailed, how long it would take, and what it would require him to disclose along the way. Cook's escort reached the door. He was gone. At 1700, Ortiz found Cross on the courtyard steps, coffee mug in hand, watching the Black Hawk lift off and bank south. He stopped beside her. They stood side by side for a moment without looking at each other. He said, I called a number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. She said, I know. Thank you. He looked at her. You knew I made the call? Not until you didn't have me burned. He nodded once. That was a complete exchange for both of them. He put his cover on and walked toward the senior NCO building. She watched the helicopter until it was gone. 24 days, a green notebook, a man who called her furniture, and a case record that will follow his name for the remainder of his career. She did not break. She did not retaliate. She absorbed every insult, documented every incident, and waited, because she had come to this base for a reason that was never about Jeffrey Cook, and she understood the difference between a distraction and a target. If you have been with this from the beginning, take a breath. You have earned it. 3 weeks later, 2015 hours, the S1 Records office, after hours. The room had changed. New personnel, different arrangement. The access terminal updated to the current cycle. Cross's desk was where it had always been. She sat at it now, out of uniform, a different folder open in front of her. Not a personnel packet. A JSOC formatted operational overview on paper she had brought herself. Classification header she had been cleared for since 2023. She read. After a moment, she reached into her jacket pocket and took out the paperback. She opened it to the dog-eared page. The margin word, Mardon. She looked at it, not long. She closed the book and set it at the corner of the desk. She turned back to the document. She had not come to this base because of Jeffrey Cook. She had come through it, through what he represented, through the space his contempt made. At the top of the operational overview, below the classification header, Cardinal Ridge, Phase 3. Below a satellite image of a facility in the North Caspian Basin, one name, Colonel Yusuf Mardon. At the bottom of the page, in the authentication field, Warden, Cardinal Ridge, acknowledge. She traced the line with one finger. She did not speak it aloud. The fluorescent bar above the desk hummed once and settled. She turned another page. Somewhere in the North Caspian Basin, a man named Mardon was moving pieces. He was confident no one was watching. He was wrong. He had always been going to be wrong. She just hadn't told him yet. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.